Canada's cap on international students and the potential economic impact. A deep dive. In recent news, Canada has decided to implement a cap on the number of international students allowed to study in the country. Yeah, this decision has sparked a lot of debate, and it's worth taking a closer look at why Canada is doing this, what the potential consequences might be, and how it could affect the country's economy. Right? So let's break it down and see how this move might lead to revenue losses, not just for universities, but for the local economy as a whole. The growing popularity of Canada as a study destination. Okay, to understand the full scope of this change, we need to start by looking at why Canada has become such a popular destination for international students in the first place. Over the past few decades, Canada has positioned itself as one of the top countries for higher education, especially for students from abroad. There are many reasons why students choose Canada. The high quality of education, the welcoming, multicultural environment, and the post-graduation work opportunities are just a few of the big draws. Canada has some of the best universities in the world, and in fact, several of its institutions consistently rank high in global rankings. Moreover, the country has a reputation for being safe, offering a high quality of life, and having a strong job market. So it's no surprise that more and more international students are choosing Canada as their place to study. Now, with the influx of students from around the world, it's important to note that international students don't just contribute to the educational system. They contribute massively to the economy, too. I mean, if you think about it, they pay significantly higher tuition fees than domestic students, and they spend money on living expenses, accommodation, transportation, food, and so on. In fact, estimates suggest that international students contribute over $21 billion to the Canadian economy each year. That's a huge amount, right? Yeah, it's not just a drop in the ocean. It's vital to many sectors of the economy. What's behind the cap on international students? So, why is Canada now imposing a cap on the number of international students? Well, the decision comes down to a mix of concerns over infrastructure strain, resource management, and the desire to prioritize domestic students. Let's start with infrastructure. Over the past few years, the number of international students coming to Canada has skyrocketed. While this has been great for the economy in terms of revenue, it's also put a lot of pressure on the educational system and local communities. Universities, for example, have been struggling to accommodate the growing number of students. Class sizes are getting larger, and there's been increasing competition for on-campus housing and even access to essential services. Plus, the rapid growth of international students has created logistical challenges for universities trying to maintain their reputation for offering personalized, high-quality education. On the social side, some critics argue that an increasing reliance on international students, who often pay higher tuition fees, might divert attention away from domestic students. You know, universities may prioritize foreign students because they're seen as a more lucrative market, which could result in fewer resources or scholarships for Canadian citizens. It's a bit of a balancing act. Canada wants to continue attracting global talent, but, it also needs to ensure that its own students are being well served. Additionally, the pressure on cities and provinces that host large numbers of international students can be overwhelming. In places like Toronto, Vancouver, and Montreal, high demand for housing from international students has driven up rent, which has contributed to a housing affordability crisis. Local businesses, from restaurants to grocery stores, have also seen changes in the demand for goods and services. Some areas are seeing a dramatic shift in how their local economies function because they're becoming more dependent on students from abroad. So, yeah, this is an issue that's been building for a while. The economic impact of the cap, right? So now we get to the real concern. What's going to happen if fewer international students are allowed to study in Canada? Let's be honest, the revenue loss could be pretty massive. I see. The contribution that international students make to Canada's economy goes way beyond just tuition fees. When you add up spending on housing, food, transportation, and even entertainment, you start to get an idea of just how significant the financial impact is. For example, many students rent apartments or homes while they're studying. These students are also spending money on utilities, internet, and other services. Without this demand, the local rental markets could suffer, and that could lead to lower income for landlords and property managers. In some areas where rental properties are particularly dependent on student tenants, this could cause real economic disruption. Also, think about the local businesses that rely on students for a significant portion of their income. Cafes, restaurants, bookstores, and even transportation services like buses and taxis. These small businesses could see a drop in customers, and that means less money circulating in the local economy. It's not just the universities that will feel the pinch. It's the entire community around them. Let's not forget about the universities themselves. A significant portion of their budgets comes from tuition fees paid by international students. Many universities in Canada are quite reliant on this revenue stream. If international student numbers are capped or reduced, it could lead to financial shortfalls for these institutions. This might force them to raise tuition fees for domestic students, cut academic programs, or even reduce staff. In the worst-case scenario, some institutions could even face financial instability, which would have long-term consequences for Canada's education system as a whole. The ripple effect on job markets and industries. I see. Another key area to consider is how the cap could affect employment in various sectors. International students don't just bring in money for universities. They also create jobs. Think about it. Universities need a large support staff to help international students adjust to life in Canada. There are administrators, counselors, orientation staff, and even teaching assistants who are all employed because of the large number of international students. If the number of international students decreases, there could be fewer jobs available in these support areas. Additionally, sectors that rely on student spending will be impacted. For example, housing services might see a drop in demand for student rentals, and local transportation companies could lose a chunk of their business. Businesses that cater specifically to international students, like travel agencies, language schools, or student insurance providers, might also face challenges. If fewer international students are coming to Canada, those industries might not be able to sustain their current level of operation, leading to job losses or business closures. Could there be solutions or workarounds? Asterisk, asterisk. Okay, so what are some potential solutions or adjustments that could help mitigate the negative economic impact of this decision? Well, one possibility is that universities and local governments could collaborate to improve housing and resource availability for students. If fewer international students are coming in, universities might have to rethink their admission strategy and prioritize students who are more likely to contribute to the local economy. Maybe offering targeted scholarships to Canadian students or focusing on programs that attract more domestic students could help offset the revenue loss. Another approach could be to create specific pathways for international students that are tied to economic sectors in need of skilled workers. Canada has a strong demand for workers in areas like technology, healthcare, and engineering, and if the country can attract students who specialize in these fields, they may be more likely to stay in Canada after graduation and contribute to the workforce. It could be a win-win situation where international students fill gaps in the Canadian job market and Canada benefits from their long-term contributions to the economy. Conclusion: balancing growth with sustainability. To wrap things up, Canada's decision to cap international student numbers has a lot of potential consequences that could lead to significant revenue losses. The financial contribution of international students to the country is undeniable, and it impacts everything from university budgets to local businesses and job markets. While the cap may be a response to growing concerns over infrastructure strain and the sustainability of high levels of international student intake, it's clear that this move could have far-reaching economic implications. It's clear that Canada needs to find a balance, balancing the need to protect its education system and resources, while also maintaining the economic benefits that come with international students. The hope is that Canada will find ways to adapt and innovate, ensuring that both domestic and international students can continue to thrive in the Canadian education system. Yeah, it's a tough situation to manage, but one thing is for sure. The impact of international students on Canada's economy is significant, and reducing their numbers will definitely be felt across the country. I see this as just the beginning of a bigger conversation about how countries can best manage their education systems and resources in a globalized world. Canada will need to carefully consider its next steps to ensure that the long-term benefits outweigh the short-term challenges.
Thanks for watching our video. Please hit the button and subscribe the channel.